Hello, and thank you for joining me on my hobby adventure. I'm Dan, and this is Forlorn Hobbies. Welcome to this event prep and army showcase video that I will be doing in preparation for the Middle-earth strategy battle game Team Championships 2024 at the end of September. My good friend Tim, the Napoleonic Wargamer, thought it would be a great idea to sign myself and a couple of the guys from Triple Crown Wargaming up to this event to assist him in his hunt for the wooden spoon. This is a 4-player event with each person using a force of 800 points. Now, due to the nature of the event pack, 2 players will be using a good army and 2 will be using evil. Now, as the Triple Crown guys both wanted to opt for evil lists, it meant that I and Tim had to come up with good forces for this event. After some discussion between us, I opted for Rohan, specifically a Defenders of Helm's Deep Legendary Legion list that I'd already had, so I didn't have to paint anything else for this event. Before covering the nitty-gritty aspects of the list, I just thought I'd give a bit of an overview of how this army came to be. Now, when I was searching for a new project to take with me to the Scouring of Cheshire a couple of years ago at Element Games in Stockport, I decided that I wanted to do a Rohan force, but not necessarily the all-mounted Riders of Theoden or Aemir lists that you regularly see at events. So I opted to go for an all-infantry army. And because the dismounted Royal Guards are one of my favourite models that really give off a strong Anglo-Saxon fantasy vibe that, as a historical gamer, really resonates with me, I was settled on a Defenders of Helm's Deep list just so I could include as many of these as possible. Now, I am not an overly competitive player. I just like the rule of cool when it comes to lists and what models I specifically like to include. Now, my 800 point list consists of 3 warbands. The first, led by Theoden, King of Rohan, with heavy armour and shield. He's accompanied by Haleth, son of Hammer, Aldor, the bowman, and 16 Rohan Royal Guard with throwing spears. The second warband consists of Gamling, with the Royal Standard of Rohan, 10 Royal Guard with throwing spears, and 2 Royal Guard. The final warband consists of Haldir, with heavy armour, bow, and 13 Galadrim warriors with bows. Now, I specifically chose not to include any of the 3 hunters, because from a thematic perspective, I would have wanted to include all 3 of them, but I just felt that this would have been too many points to sink into these 3 heroes. As the Legendary Legion requires Theoden to be taken as the army leader, that would have meant, by taking him along with the 3 hunters, that over half the available points for this list would have been taken up with these 4 characters. This would have left few points to reach the visual aesthetic that I had in mind for the army, with the massed shield wall supported by Galadrim archers to offer that increased range threat that the Legendary Legion provides. So opting for Gamling and Haldir instead still allows me to have pretty good characters, but they are cheaper, which means that I can include more of the minis that I want to build that overall aesthetic, because primarily I'm a hobbyist rather than a gamer when it comes to Middle-earth. I rounded off the heroes by taking Haleth and Aldor. Now, both of these heroes are from the films, which add a bit of flair to the list and make it a bit more fun to play with on the tabletop. Haleth adds buffs to your warrior's fight values around him, whilst Aldor is probably one of my favourite models, rules-wise, in the game, with his always shoots first, re-rolling to hit, re-rolling to wound, and it's not uncommon for me to continuously keep track of Aldor's kill count to see how well he performs at an event. When it came to deciding what warriors to accompany these heroes, I primarily went with the aesthetics of the minis themselves. Now, I like the Rohan warrior models. I think they've aged really well. However, I am not a fan of intermixing when the Rohan Royal Guard dismounts are probably my favourite models in the range. So I just kept it simple and spammed as many as I could fit into the list. Now, I went with throwing spears from a gaming perspective because not only do they offer a ranged threat, the Legendary Legion allows them to be used as spear supports, which is one thing that a dismounted Rohan army has always suffered with the lack of. And then the Galadrim elves were straightforward. I needed archers. I'd rather have elvish archers than Rohan archers because of the increased shoot value and the strength of the elf bows, just to make the most of that increased range that the Legendary Legion provides. Now, the overall numbers for the army would be 41 warriors with the 5 heroes, giving me 46 models in total, which means 24 of them would have to be killed to break me, and there would be 11 models left on the table to reach 25%. There is a good amount of resources available for the list as well, with 11 points of might starting on the board, with the option of receiving a 3 point of might per turn within 3 inches of gambling for any Rohan hero that has no might left. Now, this could be great for Aldor with his 1 point of might. He could spend the might on calling a heroic shoot or heroic accuracy, and then regenerating that point of might in the next turn, if he's camped near gambling, to then do exactly the same thing again that turn. Or Haleth calling defense to stay alive in order to give the buff to the War Guard or even Theoden around him, and then receiving that might point back to do it again to keep him alive even longer. Having taken this list to several events, I have been particularly happy with how it has performed. I've managed to win more games than I've lost with it, which is always a bonus. However, as long as I can set up an aesthetically pleasing shield wall with all my Royal Guard, I'm quite happy and in a pretty good mood for the rest of the game, even if I get curve stomped back to Friday by my opponent. The downsides of this list are the fact that there's no heavy hitty hero, but that just means I need to be a bit more tactical on the tabletop to negate this, and that is a personal choice by not including Aragorn, but I'm happy with how it performs instead of that. And the lack of strength 4 is a bit of an issue, especially against heavily armoured opponents. But given that this is a good versus evil tournament, I don't think that is going to be as relevant as it could have been if I was playing Iron Hills or Gondor, for example, because it's really only heavily armoured Morannons and Easterlings that I think will cause much trouble in that regard. I'll just have to rely on my dice. When painting this army, I wanted to step away from the more traditional paint schemes that are based on films, because as a historical gamer who has to follow painting guides of specific regiments and where all the brass buckles are counted and pointed out by the gronads of the group, I use Middle Earth as a bit of an escape from that, which allows me to just paint what I want to paint rather than I have to paint to be that, because it's more down to what the model is rather than its markings or patterns on the uniforms. Now, that said, I've still kept to a visibly Rohan look with a colour palette of green and red. The green for the Royal Guard, though, being a bit more earthy and toned down. And then I have mirrored this approach on the elves. So the elves' robes look a bit like Haldir in the film because I like that vibrant red of the cloaks and then the lighter green undertone for their robes. When it came to the characters, I just went a little bit further with the details, and it gave it an overall unified look. Now, the model that I particularly enjoyed painting was Theoden. I think the new plastic Theoden is amazing, especially to paint. However, I wanted to keep in theme with the army, so instead of the kind of dark leathery colour of his armour, I chose to use the light earthy green instead to just blend it in with the army. The other change that I made with the characters was painting the royal standard. Now, because I had the colour palette of the red and green for the army, I opted to change the royal standard from being green because I thought that would overcrowd the model and draw away from other aspects of it. So I opted to use the secondary colour of red, and then I looked for a more suitable pattern than the white horse freehand, especially because of the way that the banner moves. It would have made it difficult to replicate it on both sides to a standard that I would be happy with, and I opted for a different design that kind of resembled the shield design pattern on the Royal Guard. And if you look in the films, there is a red standard in the background which has the kind of sun pattern, which I have pretty much drawn my inspiration from, just to make it stand out a bit more on the model. I also made some objective markers using some barrels and some spare spears that I had lying around, just to blend it in and enhance that theme of being the defenders of a fortress where there is supplies of weapons that they can be throwing over the ramparts at the enemy. Now, when it came to basing, I wanted a basing scheme that enabled the more subtle colours to pop, so I went with a more wintry theme, and the snow effects that Games Workshop do really helped just pop that initial colours on the minis just that little bit further, and I'm really happy with the overall result. As I find myself in the unusual position of being finished several weeks before an event, normally I'm up painting till the ungodly hours of the morning the night before the event, finishing off basing or adding a few extra highlights. I feel a little bit lost, so I will be putting that time to use when I'm not painting some dismounts for Tim, who for some reason cannot seem to escape the calls of that Napoleonic era warfare and is deciding to cover his fiefdoms with tartan everywhere. And is going to struggle to get everything finished in time otherwise. I think I will put the rest of my time into building a display board that allows me to just finish off the project and have it as a nice centerpiece on my hobby shelf where I can look at it and just be happy with the effort that I've put in to this entire project. I just wanted to take a final moment to state the obvious in that I am really looking forward to this event and playing games with some people that I've potentially played before or even new players and just having a great laugh for the weekend. Because I think that attending events is an integral part of enjoyment as a wargamer, whether that's historical or otherwise. And yeah, I just can't wait. I will also be doing a follow-up video to this where I will be reflecting on the event itself and going through the games and hopefully what will just be a really great time. So keep an eye out for that a few weeks after the event. Thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe. Until next time, enjoy your hobby.